Good morning. Welcome to another edition of Take 5. It is Wednesday, April 13th, 2011. Let's get right to it. Got a lot to cover. Matthew 14, verse 13. Now, when Jesus heard this, he withdrew from there in a boat to a desolate place by himself. But when the crowds heard it, they followed him on foot from the towns. When he went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion on them and healed their sick. Now, when it was evening, the disciples came to him and said, "This is a desolate place, and the day is now over. Send the crowds away to go into the villages and buy food for themselves." But Jesus said, "They need not go away. You give them something to eat." They said to him, "We have only 5 loaves here and 2 fish." And he said, "Bring them here to me." Then he ordered the crowds to sit down on the grass, and taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven and said a blessing. Then he broke the loaves and gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the crowds. And they all ate and were satisfied, and they took up 12 baskets full of the broken pieces left over. And those who ate were about 5,000 men, besides women and children. All right, got a lot to cover here in the next few minutes. We're going to get it done. Jesus has just heard that his good friend and cousin, John the Baptist, has been beheaded. And so you can imagine he's grieving, he's hurting, he wants to get away, so he gets in the boat to go to the other side. And yet this crowd, and we see at the end of this passage, it's a crowd of 5,000 men, which you have to assume that a lot of them were married and had kids, so I think safely we could say at least 10,000 people. Gets to the other side ahead of him. Now, I don't know if he ran into a lot of waves or trouble on the lake, or they're just really fast walkers, but they were able to walk around the lake faster than he could get across the lake. And probably this crowd was so large because, as I mentioned yesterday, John's disciples had switched over and now were following Jesus since John had been beheaded. It doesn't say that, but we pretty much could assume that, since John's entire point was to get people to follow Jesus. So you've got this huge crowd, and Jesus is healing the sick. You know, he would like to get away and have time to grieve. And yet, his concern is more for these people than for himself. What a tender heart he has. And I would encourage you to be like Jesus and just try to put others first. Even when you're really hurting, if there's a need right in front of you, try to take care of it if you can. He will get away, and we'll look at that tomorrow. He will have some time to grieve, but right now he's got to deal with these folks, and he's compassionate on them. He doesn't send them away. He doesn't say, "I need time to myself to handle the death of my good friend." No, he heals their sick, and he teaches them, and it's been a long day, and it's getting almost dark, and so his disciples come to him, and they say, "Hey, let them go home. They're going to get hungry. Well, you can't keep them here all night. We got nothing to feed them with. You got little kids running around here. They're going to get hungry and start whining. What are we going to do?" Jesus says, "You feed them." We didn't bring any food. Now apparently they had some food. Now we can read in other accounts that a little boy had 5 loaves of bread and 2 small fish. I might have got those numbers backwards, but anyway, that's what they have here. I want to check it and make sure it's right. Yeah, 5 loaves and 2 fish. So Jesus takes, and these weren't like big loaves of bread you get at your grocery store either. These were little kind of loaves. You'd make the sandwiches out of the 2. You make 2 or 3 sandwiches. That's about all you could get out of what you had right there. So this would have fed 2 or 3 people at most. This is not a. Anyway, you see what he did. He took that and fed everybody. The disciples fed them, but he obviously multiplied it and multiplied it and multiplied it and multiplied it. Had all the people sit down, and they took it around to them. I guess the disciples served them. The disciples got to learn the value of serving people. Just a little side note: if you serve folks for a living, you're doing what Jesus says is the greatest thing to do. So, anyway, I want you to feel good about that, whatever level of service you're in. And we're going to run a little bit over, but not much more. So they fed everybody, but here's the point that we miss on this sometimes. Tremendous miracle. He feeds everybody, But then look what's left over. 12 baskets. How many disciples were there? 12. 12 baskets. Each disciple has a basket now of food left over for themselves after they fed everybody else. Perhaps you're wondering, in everything that you're doing, what about me? Are my needs going to get met? I feel like I'm pouring myself out to everybody else. Your needs are going to get met. God sees what you're doing. He's not going to let you starve spiritually, physically, emotionally, or relationally. If you don't have it right now, just hold on. It's coming. So, He's going to take care of everybody's needs. Not all our wants and desires all at the same time, but all our needs, He will meet them if you trust in Him. Anyway, what a magnificent God and Savior Jesus is. Come back tomorrow, and we're going to see another miracle on the next edition of Take 5.